The cruelest invitations are the ones sent with a smile. Sophia Carter stared at the ivory envelope resting in the center of her kitchen table. The morning sunlight spilled through the window above the sink, turning the gold lettering into something almost beautiful. Almost. Her coffee had long gone cold. Outside, a lawn-mower hummed somewhere down the street, and a dog barked twice before everything settled back into the quiet rhythm of a suburban Saturday. She slid one finger beneath the flap and unfolded the thick card inside. The paper felt expensive. Deliberately expensive. Nathan Carter and Vanessa Brooks request the pleasure of your presence at their engagement celebration. Sophia read the words once. Then again. Not because she hadn't understood them, but because some part of her still found it strange how people could package cruelty in elegant stationery. Her eyes moved to the bottom of the card. There, beneath the printed text, was a handwritten note. Just one sentence. Hope you've moved on. Nathan's handwriting had not changed. 3 years had passed since the divorce, yet she recognized every curve of every letter instantly. For a moment, the kitchen felt smaller. Not because of the invitation, but because of the memories that came with it. The late nights. The unpaid bills. The tiny apartment where they had once shared dreams bigger than their bank account. She remembered believing that loyalty was enough to build a future. She remembered being wrong. Sophia carefully folded the card closed. No dramatic reaction. No tears. No anger. Just a slow exhale. The kind that comes from someone who has already survived the worst part of the story. She placed the invitation face down on the table and wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. The ceramic was cool now. The silence lingered. Then came the soft sound of footsteps. She glanced toward the hallway. A man appeared in the doorway carrying a skillet. Tall. Relaxed. Effortlessly composed. Morning light caught the edge of his dark sweater as he crossed the kitchen. You look like that envelope owes you money, he said with a faint smile. Sophia laughed despite herself. It wasn't a loud laugh. Just enough to loosen the tension sitting in her chest. The man set a plate on the counter. Scrambled eggs. Toast. The smell of butter filled the room. Comfortable. Familiar. Real. Bad news, he asked. Sophia looked at the invitation for a second before shaking her head. Not exactly. He studied her face but didn't push. That was one thing she had learned about him. He never demanded answers. He simply made space for them when she was ready. The man poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Calm. Patient. Like he had nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Sophia picked up the envelope and slid it across the table toward him. He glanced at the front but didn't open it. Instead, he looked back at her. Do you want to go? Sophia turned toward the window. Across the street, sunlight reflected off parked cars. Ordinary lives moving through ordinary mornings. 3 years ago, she would have said no. 3 years ago, she would have avoided the embarrassment. Avoided the whispers. Avoided seeing Nathan show off the life he wanted everyone to believe was perfect. But 3 years ago, she wasn't the woman sitting here now. A faint smile touched her lips. Small. Quiet. Certain. Actually, she said, reaching for her coffee, I think I do. The man nodded once. No surprise. No questions. Just understanding. Sophia looked down at the invitation one final time. Nathan believed he was inviting his past to watch his future. What he didn't know was that the woman he remembered no longer existed. The engagement party was less than 2 weeks away, and somehow that made it feel closer than tomorrow. Sophia spent the following days pretending the invitation did not exist. It remained tucked inside a kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus and old receipts, hidden but never forgotten. Every time she opened the drawer, the edge of the ivory envelope seemed to find her. Every time she saw it, she remembered exactly why Nathan had sent it. Not because he wanted her there. Because he wanted to be seen. On Thursday evening, rain tapped softly against the windows of their townhouse while Sophia sat curled into the corner of the couch with her laptop balanced on her knees. A documentary played quietly in the background, though she had not absorbed a single word in the last 20 minutes. Her attention drifted instead toward social media. Curiosity had always been one of her weaknesses. One search led to another. Soon, she was staring at photos from Vanessa's public profile. Luxury resorts. Designer handbags. Champagne glasses raised beneath crystal chandeliers. Perfect smiles captured from perfect angles. Hundreds of comments praised the glamorous couple. Sophia scrolled in silence. Nathan looked different now. More polished. More confident. His suits appeared more expensive. His smile looked wider. Yet something about the images felt strangely familiar. She recognized the expression in his eyes. It was the same look he used to wear when they could barely afford groceries but he wanted everyone to believe they were doing fine. The same look he wore when appearances mattered more than reality. A notification appeared. Vanessa had posted another photo just minutes earlier. The caption read, "Counting down the days until forever." Nathan stood beside her in a navy suit, one hand resting proudly on her shoulder. Comments flooded in beneath the image. Couple goals. Power couple. Living the dream. Sophia closed the application. The room suddenly felt quieter. A floor lamp cast warm light across the living room while rain continued to slide down the glass outside. Across the room, Alexander sat reading a hardcover book. He looked up as soon as she shut the laptop. "Everything okay?" he asked. Sophia hesitated before nodding. "I was looking at their engagement posts." Alexander closed the book and placed it on the coffee table. "And?" Sophia let out a small breath. "They seem very happy." He smiled gently. "That is what social media is for." The answer caught her off guard. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. Alexander grinned and returned to his book. No lectures. No criticism. No attempt to convince her how she should feel. Just quiet perspective. Later that night, after Alexander had gone upstairs, Sophia found herself standing alone in the kitchen. The rain had stopped. Streetlights painted long reflections across the wet pavement outside. She opened the drawer and pulled out the invitation once more. Her eyes settled on Nathan's handwritten message. "Hope you've moved on." 3 years ago, those words might have wounded her. Tonight, they felt different. Not because the past no longer mattered, but because it no longer controlled her. She folded the card and slid it back into the envelope. Then she reached for her phone. A few minutes later, an event confirmation appeared on the screen. Attendance confirmed. Sophia placed the phone on the counter and stared into the darkness beyond the window. Somewhere across the city, Nathan was probably expecting an uncomfortable reunion. What he did not realize was that the woman walking into that ballroom would not be arriving alone, and she would not be arriving as the person he remembered. The decision should have felt satisfying. Instead, it followed Sophia through the next several days like a shadow she could not quite shake. Once she confirmed her attendance, the engagement party became real. No longer an envelope hidden in a drawer. No longer a distant event sitting somewhere on the calendar. It was waiting for her. Saturday arrived beneath a bright blue sky. Sophia spent the morning at a local farmer's market a few miles from home. Fresh flowers lined the entrance. Children ran between booths while musicians played acoustic covers beneath striped tents. The smell of roasted coffee drifted through the air. It should have been an ordinary morning. Yet memories had a way of appearing when least invited. A young couple stood near a fruit stand debating which peaches to buy. The sight pulled Sophia backward through time. Years earlier, she and Nathan used to spend Saturday mornings exactly like that. Back when every dollar mattered. Back when dreams were discussed over discount groceries and second-hand furniture. Nathan had not always been the man people saw now. There was a time when ambition looked almost admirable on him. Sophia remembered sitting beside him at a tiny kitchen table in their first apartment. The wallpaper had peeled near the ceiling. The refrigerator rattled every few minutes. Summers were so hot they kept a box fan running all night. Nathan used to spread business plans across the table and talk for hours about the future. Sophia listened to every word. She believed in him before anyone else did. When his first business struggled, she worked overtime. When bills piled up, she picked up freelance projects during weekends. When opportunities failed, she told him to try again. She had celebrated every small victory as though it belonged to both of them. Maybe that was why the ending hurt so much. Not because she lost a marriage. Because she had helped build the foundation beneath the life he eventually chose to share with someone else. You disappeared for a minute. Alexander's voice brought her back. He stood beside her holding 2 cups of coffee. Sunlight reflected from his sunglasses as he handed one over. Sophia accepted it with a grateful smile. Just thinking. Dangerous hobby, he said. She laughed softly. Alexander always seemed to know exactly when she needed lightness. They continued walking through the market. No rush. No destination. Just easy conversation carried beneath clear skies. Sophia watched people pass around them. Families. Couples. Friends. Ordinary happiness. For the first time in years, she realized she was no longer comparing her life to someone else's. Not Nathan's. Not Vanessa's. Not anyone's. That realization felt strangely freeing. Later that afternoon, they returned home carrying fresh bread and flowers. As Sophia arranged white tulips in a glass vase, her phone buzzed on the counter. A new notification appeared. Vanessa had tagged Nathan in another engagement post. Hundreds of comments flooded beneath the photo within minutes. Sophia stared at the screen briefly before locking it again. Then she placed the phone face down and continued arranging the flowers. Across the room, Alexander watched her for a moment before returning to his book. Neither of them said anything. They did not need to. Outside, the afternoon sun slowly dipped lower across the neighborhood. Inside, the house remained peaceful. But less than 2 weeks away, beneath crystal chandeliers and polished smiles, a very different evening was beginning to take shape. 3 years. Earlier, long before engagement photos and handwritten notes, Sophia Carter had walked into a small neighborhood coffee shop carrying a cardboard box filled with everything that remained from her former office. The box was heavier than it looked. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. A framed photo she no longer displayed. A notebook filled with plans that belonged to a different version of her life. A ceramic mug with a chipped handle. Tiny pieces of a future she once thought was permanent. Rain fell steadily outside that afternoon. Water streaked across the windows while customers huddled over laptops and steaming cups of coffee. Sophia chose a corner table and stared at the untouched latte in front of her. The divorce had been final for nearly 6 months. Friends had stopped checking in as often. Family members assumed she was doing better. But healing rarely followed the schedule people expected. Some days felt manageable. Others felt impossibly long. That afternoon happened to be one of the longer ones. A sudden crash broke through the quiet atmosphere. Several people turned. A man standing near the counter had accidentally dropped a stack of folders. Papers scattered across the floor. The man sighed and crouched down to gather them. Without thinking, Sophia stood and helped. Together they collected documents before the air conditioning could carry them across the room. "Thank you," the man said. His smile was warm but unremarkable. No dramatic first impression. No instant spark. Just kindness. "You are welcome," Sophia replied. He glanced at the cardboard box on her table. "Looks like you are moving offices." "Something like that." "Good move or bad move?" Sophia considered the question. Then she surprised herself with the answer. "I honestly do not know yet." The stranger nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes that is the most honest answer. They exchanged a brief smile before returning to separate tables. That should have been the end of it. Instead, 20 minutes later, the barista accidentally prepared an extra coffee and offered it to the nearest customer. The cup landed on Sophia's table. Moments later, the same stranger walked over carrying a blueberry muffin. "Fair trade?" he asked. Sophia laughed for the first time all day. They talked for nearly an hour. Nothing remarkable. Favorite books. Travel stories. The best places to find coffee in the city. Not once did he ask about her divorce. Not once did he try to impress her. When they finally stood to leave, rain still tapped against the sidewalks outside. "Alexander," he said, extending a hand. "Sophia." They shook hands beneath the soft glow of the cafe lights. Then went their separate ways. A week later they met again by coincidence. Then again. Eventually coincidence turned into routine. Looking back now, Sophia often found it strange how quietly important moments entered a person's life. There had been no grand entrance. No expensive car waiting outside. No clues suggesting Alexander Hayes was anything other than a thoughtful man who enjoyed books and strong coffee. Standing in her kitchen now, 3 years later, arranging fresh flowers beside the window, Sophia smiled at the memory. Across the room, Alexander sat reading as evening sunlight painted gold across the hardwood floor. The simplicity of the scene would have surprised the woman she used to be. Because sometimes the most valuable things arrived without announcing their worth. Over the next 3 years, Sophia learned something she had never fully understood during her marriage. Peace was not something you found. It was something you protected. The world around Alexander Hayes seemed unusually simple for a man who rarely spoke about himself. He drove practical cars. He preferred quiet restaurants over crowded hotspots. His favorite weekends involved bookstores, hiking trails, and long conversations over breakfast. If strangers passed them on the street, nobody looked twice. And that was exactly how Alexander seemed to like it. Sophia noticed early on that he was careful whenever people asked what he did for work. He never lied. He simply answered without details. "Business," he would say with a polite smile. Then he would change the subject. At first she assumed he owned a small company. Later she guessed he might be some type of consultant. The truth never seemed important enough to investigate. After everything she had survived with Nathan, she had stopped measuring people by job titles. Character mattered more. Consistency mattered more. The way someone treated a waiter, a cashier, or a stranger mattered more. Alexander passed every test without ever knowing he was being tested. One autumn evening they sat outside a small Italian restaurant downtown. String lights hung above the patio while cool air carried the scent of fresh bread and garlic from the kitchen. A black luxury sedan pulled to the curb across the street. The driver stepped out and immediately greeted Alexander. Not casually. Respectfully. Almost formally. The exchange lasted only a few seconds before the man returned to his vehicle and drove away. Sophia watched the interaction with curiosity. "Friend of yours?" she asked. Alexander took a sip of wine and smiled. Something like that. It was not the first unusual moment. Occasionally people recognized him in public. Sometimes strangers approached to shake his hand. Other times restaurant managers appeared unexpectedly and insisted on sending complimentary desserts. Sophia noticed these things but never pushed for explanations. Everyone had a past. Everyone had private chapters they shared when they were ready. If Alexander wanted to tell her more, he would. Months passed. Then years. Their relationship grew stronger through ordinary routines rather than dramatic moments. Morning coffee. Grocery shopping. Movie nights on the couch. Long drives with no destination. Sophia discovered that happiness often arrived disguised as normal life. One Friday afternoon, about a week before the engagement party, she stopped by Alexander's home office carrying 2 cups of coffee. The room was unusually quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows and reflected across polished wood shelves lined with books. Alexander was on a conference call. Sophia paused when she heard someone speaking through the computer speaker. "We can move the board meeting to Tuesday if that works better for Mr. Hayes." Another voice followed. "The investors are waiting for his final approval." Sophia froze. Briefly. Investors. Board meeting. Final approval. Alexander noticed her standing there and smiled. His expression remained calm, but he muted the call before accepting the coffee. "Thank you," he said. Sophia handed him the cup. "Busy day?" "A little." The call resumed moments later. Sophia quietly left the room. She stood in the hallway for several seconds, thinking. Questions lingered in the back of her mind now. Small pieces that never seemed to fit together. The respect strangers showed him. The private meetings. The guarded answers. Yet somehow she still found herself smiling. Whatever Alexander's secret was, it had never changed the way he treated her. And that mattered more than anything else. Inside the office, voices continued discussing decisions involving numbers so large they barely sounded real. But Sophia walked away without hearing the rest. She had no idea that in just a few days, everyone else would learn exactly who Alexander Hayes really was. The night of the engagement party arrived wrapped in a kind of elegance that seemed designed for photographs. The downtown hotel glowed against the evening skyline, its glass exterior reflecting thousands of city lights. Luxury cars lined the entrance while guests stepped onto a red carpet leading toward the grand ballroom. Inside, crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across polished marble floors. Soft music floated through the air. Servers moved quietly between guests carrying silver trays filled with sparkling drinks and delicate appetizers. Everything about the evening was expensive. Everything about the evening was intentional. Sophia stood in front of the bedroom mirror fastening a pair of simple pearl earrings. She wore a black evening dress that was elegant without trying too hard. No flashy labels. No dramatic statement. Just confidence. The woman staring back at her looked nothing like the person who had opened a cardboard box inside a coffee shop 3 years earlier. She looked calm. More importantly, she felt calm. Alexander adjusted the cuff of his jacket near the doorway. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. Understated. Timeless. He glanced toward her reflection and smiled. "You look beautiful." Sophia smiled back. "Thank you." Neither of them mentioned Nathan. Neither of them mentioned Vanessa. The silence felt intentional. Like two people walking into a storm without needing to discuss the weather. During the drive downtown, city lights blurred past the windows. Traffic moved steadily beneath clear skies. Sophia watched familiar streets slide by while her thoughts remained surprisingly quiet. The anxiety she expected never arrived. Instead, she felt curious. Curious about how much had changed. Curious about how little it mattered. The hotel entrance came into view 20 minutes later. Valets hurried between arriving vehicles while guests gathered beneath towering columns at the front entrance. As soon as they stepped from the car, Sophia noticed several heads turning. Not because anyone recognized them. Because Alexander carried himself with an effortless confidence that naturally drew attention. Yet he appeared completely unaware of it. They entered the ballroom together. Conversations filled the room. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Laughter echoed beneath the high ceilings. Giant floral arrangements decorated every corner. Near the center of the room stood Nathan and Vanessa. Nathan looked exactly as Sophia expected. Impeccably dressed. Perfect smile. Hand resting comfortably around Vanessa's waist as he greeted guests. Vanessa wore a designer gown that seemed chosen specifically to attract attention. Together they looked like the image of success. The image they wanted everyone to see. Sophia noticed Nathan first. Nathan noticed Sophia almost immediately afterward. For a brief moment, the noise of the ballroom seemed to fade. His smile faltered. Only slightly. Barely enough for anyone else to notice. Then his gaze shifted toward Alexander. Nathan studied him for a second before relaxing again. Whatever conclusion he reached appeared to satisfy him. A confident smile returned. Across the room, Vanessa whispered something into Nathan's ear while glancing toward Sophia. Both of them laughed quietly. Sophia pretended not to notice. She accepted a sparkling water from a passing server and continued walking. Alexander remained beside her. Completely at ease. Several guests watched the couple enter. Some recognized Sophia. Others remembered details from the divorce years ago. Curious whispers began spreading between tables. Questions drifted quietly through the crowd. Is that Sophia? Who is she with? Did she really come? Sophia heard none of them directly. But she felt the attention gathering. The anticipation. The expectation that something interesting might happen before the night was over. What nobody inside the ballroom realized was that the most important person in the room had already arrived, and almost no one knew his name. The evening settled into a comfortable rhythm for everyone except the people paying the closest attention. Conversations drifted between business deals, vacation plans, and wedding details while soft piano music floated through the ballroom. Yet beneath the polished atmosphere, curiosity continued to grow. More guests had noticed Sophia. More guests had noticed the man standing beside her. And more importantly, Nathan had noticed that Sophia appeared far happier than he expected. Nathan approached first. A practiced smile rested on his face as he crossed the ballroom with Vanessa at his side. Several nearby guests immediately became interested in their drinks, their phones, or anything that allowed them to watch without appearing obvious. Sophia saw them coming and calmly set her glass on a nearby cocktail table. Sophia, Nathan said warmly. I am glad you could make it. His tone sounded friendly. His eyes did not. Thank you for inviting me, Sophia replied. Vanessa offered a dazzling smile. We were honestly surprised you accepted. The comment was delivered sweetly enough to pass as polite conversation. Sophia simply smiled back. Life is full of surprises. For a second, Vanessa seemed unsure how to respond. Nathan quickly redirected his attention toward Alexander. And you must be Sophia's guest. Alexander extended his hand. Alexander Hayes. Nathan shook it. Nice to meet you. His expression suggested the name meant nothing to him. So, Alexander, what line of work are you in? Sophia recognized the question immediately. It was the same question people always asked when they wanted to measure someone. Alexander remained completely relaxed. Business. Nathan chuckled softly. That covers a lot of territory. It does. The answer ended there. No explanation. No details. Around them, conversations continued. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. Yet the small circle surrounding the four of them felt strangely quiet. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Business can mean almost anything these days, she said. Startups, consulting, sales. What kind? Alexander smiled politely. A little of everything. Sophia nearly laughed. She had heard that answer before. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Nathan. It was subtle but unmistakable. They thought he was avoiding the question. Nathan leaned casually against the table. Well, whatever it is, I am sure it keeps you busy. Sometimes. The simplicity of Alexander's responses seemed to frustrate them more than any argument could have. There was nothing to challenge. Nothing to criticize directly. Only calm confidence. A few nearby guests had begun listening openly now. One woman standing beside the dessert table whispered something to her husband while watching the exchange. Nathan noticed the growing audience. His smile widened slightly. Sophia always had a talent for seeing potential in people, he said. That was one of her best qualities. The statement sounded complimentary. The implication did not. Sophia understood exactly what he meant. Years ago she had believed in Nathan when almost nobody else did. The reminder was deliberate. Vanessa laughed lightly. That is such a nice way to put it. For the first time all evening, a faint tension touched the air. Yet Alexander showed no reaction whatsoever. He simply looked at Sophia. Would you like another sparkling water? Sophia smiled. I would. The simplicity of the exchange somehow shifted the balance of the conversation. Nathan noticed it. Vanessa noticed it. The attention Alexander gave Sophia was genuine. Effortless. Unforced. And for reasons neither of them could explain, that seemed to bother them far more than they expected. Across the ballroom, the main entrance opened again. Several executives and senior guests stepped inside. One silver-haired gentleman entered last. The moment he appeared, a ripple of recognition spread through the room. And when his eyes landed on Alexander, his expression immediately changed. The silver-haired gentleman moved through the ballroom with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being noticed. Conversations softened as he passed. Several guests greeted him immediately. Others stepped aside to clear a path. Nathan watched with obvious interest. Vanessa straightened slightly. Even people who did not know his name recognized influence when they saw it. The man crossed half the ballroom without hesitation. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stopped directly in front of Alexander Hayes. His face broke into a genuine smile. There you are, he said. I was beginning to think you were not coming. Alexander rose from his seat and shook his hand. Good evening, Richard. The familiarity caught several nearby guests off guard. Sophia noticed Nathan's expression shift almost instantly. Richard laughed warmly. The board meeting on Tuesday was a disaster without you. Half the room spent 20 minutes arguing over numbers you solved in 5. Alexander smiled. Sounds productive. Richard turned toward Sophia. And you must be Sophia. It is wonderful to finally meet you. Sophia blinked. You have heard of me? Of course. Richard's smile widened. Alexander talks about you all the time. For the first time all evening, Sophia looked genuinely surprised. Around them, more people had begun paying attention. Richard glanced back toward Alexander. I should let you enjoy your evening, Mr. Hayes. The shareholders can survive one night without you. The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Mr. Hayes. Shareholders. Nearby conversation stopped completely. Nathan frowned. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Richard appeared not to notice. He shook Alexander's hand once more before moving on to greet other guests. Silence lingered after he left. Not complete silence. The ballroom music still played. Glasses still clinked. Yet inside their small circle, everything felt different. Nathan stared at Alexander. Shareholders, he asked. Alexander took a calm sip of sparkling water. Richard likes to exaggerate. Before anyone could respond, another guest approached. Then another. Then another. Each greeted Alexander by name. Not casually. Respectfully. One man thanked him for attending a recent charity event. Another mentioned a successful acquisition. A woman congratulated him on an international expansion announced earlier that month. Sophia listened carefully. Small fragments began connecting inside her mind. The board meetings. The investors. The unusual recognition. The private calls. The respectful strangers. Suddenly, none of it seemed random anymore. Nathan pulled out his phone. The movement was subtle but desperate. His thumb moved quickly across the screen. Search results appeared almost instantly. Then the color drained from his face. Vanessa leaned closer. Nathan silently turned the screen toward her. Sophia could not see the display. She did not need to. Vanessa's reaction said everything. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. She looked from the phone to Alexander and back again. Across the ballroom, whispers spread rapidly now. People were searching. Confirming. Realizing. The man standing beside Sophia was not a consultant. He was not a small business owner. He was not simply successful. Alexander Hayes was the founder and majority owner of one of the largest investment groups in the country. A company whose value reached into the billions. The realization moved through the ballroom like electricity. Yet Alexander remained exactly the same person he had been all evening. Calm. Polite. Unimpressed by his own reputation. Nathan lowered his phone slowly. The confidence that had carried him through the evening was gone. In its place stood disbelief. Not because Sophia had moved on. Not because she was happy. But because the woman he once underestimated had built a life so extraordinary that he had failed to recognize it even while standing directly in front of it. For several minutes after the truth became impossible to ignore, the ballroom seemed suspended between disbelief and realization. Conversations continued, but differently now. Softer. More careful. People who had barely noticed Alexander earlier were suddenly eager to greet him. Guests who had spent the evening discussing investments and business opportunities now found reasons to drift closer. Yet the most remarkable thing was that Alexander treated every person exactly the same. The hotel manager. The waitstaff. The executives. The strangers. Nothing about his demeanor changed. Sophia watched quietly from beside him. In that moment, she finally understood why his success had remained invisible for so long. It was not because he hid it. It was because he never needed it to define him. Across the room, Nathan stood unusually still. Vanessa remained beside him, but the effortless confidence they had displayed earlier had vanished. The spotlight they spent months preparing for now belonged to someone else, and that someone had never asked for it. Nathan eventually approached one last time. Not with the easy swagger he carried at the beginning of the evening. Not with the subtle sarcasm hidden beneath polite conversation. Just a man carrying the weight of an unexpected truth. "I had no idea," he admitted. Alexander offered a courteous smile. "Most people do not." Nathan nodded slowly. His eyes shifted toward Sophia. For a second, neither of them spoke. Years of memories existed inside that silence. The small apartment. The struggles. The sacrifices. The dreams that had once belonged to both of them. Nathan looked away first. "You seem happy," he said quietly. Sophia considered the statement. Then she smiled. "I am." It was the simplest answer she could have given. It was also the most honest. Nathan lowered his gaze briefly. Perhaps he expected resentment. Perhaps he expected a reminder of old mistakes. Perhaps he expected some form of victory lap after everything that had happened. Instead, Sophia offered none of those things. Because the strange thing about healing was that eventually revenge stopped feeling important. The need to prove something disappeared. The need to win disappeared. All that remained was peace. A few minutes later, the engagement celebration resumed around them. Music filled the ballroom once more. Guests returned to their tables. Laughter slowly replaced whispers. Life moved forward. Sophia glanced toward Alexander. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Whenever you are." He offered his arm. She took it. Together they walked toward the exit beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. No dramatic farewell. No final confrontation. No attempt to make anyone feel small. As they crossed the lobby, cool night air waited beyond the glass doors. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. Cars moved through the streets below like streams of white and red light. Behind them, an entire ballroom continued discussing what had happened. Ahead of them stretched something much more valuable than attention. A future. Outside, Alexander opened the car door for her. Sophia paused briefly before getting inside. She glanced back at the hotel one final time. Not with anger. Not with regret. Only gratitude for how far she had come. 3 years earlier she had believed her story ended when her marriage failed. Tonight proved the opposite. Some endings were actually beginnings wearing different clothes. She slid into the passenger seat and smiled as Alexander settled behind the wheel. The engine started softly. The hotel lights grew smaller in the distance as they drove away. Inside the quiet comfort of the car, Sophia rested her hand in his. No audience. No applause. No need for either. Because she had not won Nathan back. She had won herself.